Joining us on the program, Catherine Temp from Campus Reform, the reporter who broke the story. Catherine, thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So how did you actually learn about Professor, and is it Professor Guth?
Guth, yeah, I know. Okay. Well, I was just going through Navy Yard tweets, kind of assuming that some professor might have said something, searching with that in NRA, and I was right. I saw this, and I kind of couldn't believe it.
Yeah, well, no, because what he said, I mean, again, he said he hoped that the next time something like this happened, that among the victims,
it's your sons and daughters, meaning yours,
right.
meaning anybody who's an NRA member. Yeah, I couldn't believe it.
I mean, again, I don't care if you're anti-gun or not.
Right.
That's just a weird, sick, horrible thing
right.
to say.
Well, regardless of what you think about the NRA, definitely not cool to wish that anybody's kids were murdered. And, somebody tweeted at him pretty much that, how dare you say that about people's kids? And he tweeted back, God's justice takes many forms. He also wrote about it in his blog.
Yep.
Spoke with him on the phone yesterday, and I said, do you regret saying this? And he said, hell no, twice. So it wasn't just a tweet in the heat of the moment. It's repeatedly defending these statements.
It's just amazing. Mm-hmm. That's amazing. So since you posted this story earlier today, the story really has taken off.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so far, there's not been any retraction. But I noticed the University of Kansas has been tweeting to folks who have been tweeting about this, saying, look, this was his personal Twitter account. We don't agree with what he said. We express our sympathies, to the folks who were affected by this. So the University of Kansas is definitely backing away. Meanwhile, I reached out to him on Twitter, too. Mm-hmm. And he immediately said, no, free speech, man.
They probably told him to shut up.
I didn't say anything about his First Amendment rights. I just, had asked him about this. But it appears as if, this is the first refuge of scoundrels right now. It's just, I've got my free speech rights, even if nobody's disagreeing with that.
Right. Well, nobody's disagreeing with that. The thing is he's a professor, and he's going to have students in his class, certainly, who are children of NRA members. And these students have a right to feel comfortable in the classroom and not know that their professor had recently wished that they were victims of a mass shooting. That's the issue here. And, so what about those? Also, his Twitter does have a link on the top of it underneath his name to his professional profile, which does identify him as a professor at the University of Kansas. So personal Twitter or not, definitely associates him directly with the university.
Yeah. And, as we saw, Michigan State University recently, you had a creative writing professor who made some comments about Republicans and said, look, I'll treat you guys fairly in class, outside of class, wink, wink. And he ended up getting a semester-long paid suspension, which is a paid vacation.
Right. He got to go away from where he might face any heat and just collect his huge salary, which is paid for, by the students and the taxpayers at MSU.
So in this case, are they going to erect a statue for this professor
I don't know
campus?
what they're going to do, but I mean, the school just sent me an email saying, this is our, not our beliefs, it's horrible, blah, blah, blah. And I asked them, so what do you plan to do about students who might feel uncomfortable? And I asked them, because the school does have a social media policy, but I guess it only applies to technically school accounts. But I mean, that's not the issue here. The issue is these students have a right to be comfortable in the classroom, and they have a right. They have a right to freedom of expression. And how are these students, if they are supporters of Second Amendment rights, how are they going to feel comfortable expressing those opinions, knowing that that will make their professor want them to die?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. There are a lot of students there.
Right.
And frankly, there are a lot of, there are probably some colleagues that this professor has who might be not just a little offended, but maybe even a little bothered by this. I mean, again, this isn't just somebody saying, I'm really bothered by what happened in Washington, D.C. Gosh, I wish we could have more gun control laws. This was a guy who says, if you're an NRA member, I hope your children die.
Right. He was saying, I hope it doesn't happen to anybody, and he thinks that makes it different. But he's saying, I hope it doesn't happen to anybody, but it's going to happen. It's going to happen again, and I hope it's your children. That is not even I hope it's you, but I hope it's your children. Your children. I mean, this is coming from a guy who's trying to say trying to act like he's some sort of pro peace guy, anti-gun.
Right.
That's more violent than anything I've ever heard come out of the mouth of anybody that's in the NRA.
Well, absolutely, and I said this before. I'll say it again now. I don't think two wrongs don't make a right.
Right.
And if gun owners see any gun owner acting like this while they're representing gun owners, call them out on it. For goodness sakes.
Absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely.
that's the other thing. when we talk about the need for greater civility and blah, 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 the people who often say this then turn a blind eye to the most offensive and egregious statements that are made by people like this. What's wrong with, where's Jim Carrey? I mean, where's Jim Carrey to say, dude, over the top, right? I mean, where's some of these anti-gun celebrities to step in and say, okay, look, I'm not a big fan of the NRA, but you're really out there. You don't speak for me.
Right. Well, because they, maybe because they know there's nothing that they can really say. I mean, they don't ever want to retract anything. Obviously, there were rumors at the beginning that this was done with an assault weapon, and they weren't retracted to the point where people like this professor still seem to think that it was done with an assault weapon. Because I had a conversation with him, and I asked him, well, what kinds of things do you mean should be done? He said something needs to be done about guns. He's like, well, like outlawing assault weapons. This was done with a shotgun, not an assault weapon, right. So this wouldn't have prevented it at all. So it's just more of, spreading misinformation and not understanding the issue. Just this issue in the mainstream media, guns are bad, and if you support gun rights or Second Amendment rights, you're bad.
So, you said that you found this because you sort of had an idea, you had an inkling that a professor had said something somewhere about this. At Campus Reform, I mean, you're seeing this type of stuff, maybe not always about the gun issue, but you're seeing this stuff on a regular basis. How bad are these college professors, or how bad has it gotten on college campuses around the country in terms of professors bloviating like this and students knowing, okay, I can't respond, I can't be myself, right, or else I'm going to get in trouble here?
Right. I mean, it's constant. USC, another student videotaped something at USC where professors saying all Republicans are stupid racists. I mean, it's constant. Like I went to Hillsdale College myself, where this was obviously not.
Did you actually? So at Hillsdale, when you went into some courses, did you have college professors be like, these progressives are stupid? They're all stupid.
No. Absolutely not.
Really?
Absolutely not. I mean, we knew that a lot of our professors obviously were conservative, but this isn't even these professors saying I'm a Democrat or I'm a progressive. They're saying the most horrible things. And these, like the creative writing class, for example, that's a subjectively graded class.
Right. I
would be horrified, especially because he was saying he was going to come after students who he thought were closeted racists, and he thought Republicans were closeted racists.
Right.
If you have like the wrong bumper sticker on your car, he's going to follow you out of the parking lot. I mean, what does that even mean? That's horrifying.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. And if you're a student, I mean, how do you push back against this? I had said earlier, if I was a student, maybe I'd drop the class.
Right. Well, at the Leadership Institutes or the Campus Reform, basically we are reaching out to students and asking them to come to us and let us know about these things so we can bring them to light. And because, kind of before, a lot of people don't know how it's going on. People are horrified by this and shocked because they haven't heard that it's going on until recently. And so that's like the most important thing, I think, to kind of get students to come to us and help them out and use us as a resource to kind of get these things out so they kind of know what students are going through in the classroom, because it would be hard to do it by yourself. It would be hard to, step out as a Republican or as, a Second Amendment supporter, knowing that your professor has these extreme views and will hold it against you.
Absolutely. And what's sad is that we hear within the academic community all the time that, for instance, one of the reasons why we can't have campus carry is because our universities are one of the last settings where you can have freewheeling exchanges of ideas and you can have contentious debates that often get very emotional. Not so much, apparently.
No, I wrote a story, actually, I don't remember, it was a few months ago, I think, about how Los Angeles community colleges made gun restrictions so severe that the gun safety class that had been taught at two of the campuses could no longer be taught by saying non-operational weapons as well, claiming that students might see a gun on campus and get scared, even if it were non-operational. And I talked to one of the men who had been teaching this forever, and he said, yeah, these classes were taught in locked rooms with the windows drawn down with non-operational weapons. So there's absolutely no way that anybody would ever just bump into a gun on campus and become horrified. So it obviously wasn't about that.
No,
ever.
In fact, I remember we talked about this story a lot. That was a great story again, by the way, because this guy, I'm blanking on his name, was the subject of a front page cover story in LA Weekly, the alternative weekly paper for Los Angeles, the big one, when he was on the local school board. He had managed to tick off everybody that he worked with. He had such a a personality problem. That was, I think, the headline, the personality problem of Brett,
Yes.
blah, 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 blah.
Yes.
And it was like basically what a self-aggrandizing jerk this guy was.
Mm-hmm.
Scott Svonkin, thank you. How could I forget Lord Svonkin? How could I forget? And we asked Lord Svonkin to appear on this program, but he wouldn't. He would never respond to us.
Right.
But that was the deal. Like he had decided. Oh no.
Well, he doesn't know anything. He wrote it, and I said, "What does non-operational mean?" He said, "I don't know." You wrote it, and you don't know, and you're gonna come out and say that to the media. I mean, I'm not surprised. He didn't want to talk to you, not one bit.
That's that's something that I think is a real commonality here, Catherine. Educators, people who consider themselves, I'm sure, to be quite intellectual and quite knowledgeable about stuff, opining about stuff that they know absolutely nothing about and refusing to admit they know nothing about it.
Right. Well, it concerns, all of us at Leadership Institute's Campus Reform that we, this is going to be worse in the future because at these campuses, students are not having to defend their beliefs either. So how are they going to be able to ever argue anything from another side if they have to? It's just kind of taken for granted that the progressive perspective is the correct perspective. And if you don't take that perspective, you're ignorant, you're racist, you're homophobe, you're all these other things. And that's just taken for granted. It's not something that anyone ever has to defend.
Back in the late 60s, this is before my time, but back in the late 60s when the new left took over and they actually literally took over college campuses, they complained that the establishment had made these campuses irrelevant, had made the topics that were being discussed, out of date. It wasn't the education that people were receiving on these college campuses were not applicable to modern life. They felt like the campuses themselves had become these sort of antiquated places. I tell you what, here we are, Catherine, some 50 years later, 45 years later, and you could make the exact same case from a conservative perspective.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, these professors are just allowed to use their classrooms. It's not even like indoctrination at this point. They're threatening conservatives. It's completely just unacceptable. And the fact that this one professor is on a paid vacation, and that University of Kansas is not doing anything about this professor, defending it as free speech. This is an outrage, and people should be calling the schools. People should be, if you disagree, then you should, make sure something's done about it, or do all you can to make sure something's done about it, or it's going to keep happening because it's been continuing to happen.
Yep, absolutely. Well, listen, campusreform.org, you guys are doing a fantastic job of covering this stuff. Look, the big television networks, the cable news networks, they don't have campus correspondents. And so if we're actually, and Lord knows as a parent, our kids aren't going to be honest and tell us what's going on campus when we give them a call. So in order for us to really know what's going on, we need organizations and groups like yours that are reporting from the classrooms and reporting from the quads and really reporting from the front lines of these ideological and intellectual fights.
Yep, definitely.
Well,
thanks.
Keep it up and come back in studio, will you?
All right, I will. Thanks.